Roman Reigns as Seth Rollins returns and unveils new faction members on WWE RAW. Tensions explode on WWE RAW. Seth Rollins returns with shocking new faction. Roman Reigns wasn't ready for this. The Visionary is back, and he's not alone. In this explosive episode, we break down Seth Rollins' dramatic return to WWE RAW, where he unveils a powerful new faction that might just shift the balance of power in WWE. With Roman Reigns watching closely, this could mark the beginning of a brutal war between two unstoppable forces. It happened not with a bang, but with a tremor, subtle at first, like the shift in wind before a storm rips through everything in its path. The lights inside the Barclays Center flickered, not due to any technical failure, but because of something else, something less mechanical and more ominous. The kind of energy that lingers just before history rewrites itself. And when the lights returned to full power, the crowd erupted into a deafening roar. There, standing at the top of the ramp, was a man many thought they wouldn't see again for months. Seth Rollins. Gone was the limp, the hesitancy, the shadow of injury that had forced him off the road. In its place stood something different. Not just a man healed, but a man reborn. The Visionary had returned, but not in the way anyone expected. Not as the lone wolf with a messiah complex. Not as the eccentric prophet cloaked in technicolor suits and twisted laughter. This time, Rollins came as something else entirely. Something colder. Something more calculating. And as the camera panned in closer, capturing the narrowed eyes and clenched jaw, the message became clear: he hadn't just come back. He came back with war on his mind, but to truly understand the earthquake that just rocked WWE RAW, we must go back. Not to last week. Not even to the day Rollins vanished from our screens. No, this story begins in silence. In hospital rooms and private gyms. In bitter whispers and phone calls that left more questions than answers. Because when Seth Rollins went down with a shattered knee, the world assumed the Visionary's prophecy had been paused. They were wrong. His revenge had only just begun. The injury occurred on a cold January night during a live event in Kansas City, an untelevised match that should have been routine. But halfway through, Rollins collapsed mid-run. No contact. No impact. Just a collapse. Medical staff rushed in. His knee had buckled beneath him like a tree splintering at the root. Fans in the front row described the look in his eyes not as pain, but as disbelief, like a man who had just watched his future evaporate in real time. Within days, the footage surfaced online. Seth Rollins clutching his knee, grimacing, mouthing something to himself over and over again: "Not now, not like this." The diagnosis was swift and brutal: a severe MCL tear. Doctors estimated a 9-month recovery. SummerSlam was off the table. WrestleMania? Unthinkable. Headlines blared that the Visionary's light had been extinguished. But they didn't know the truth. Behind the scenes, something darker was brewing. According to sources close to the Rollins camp, what followed wasn't just rehabilitation, it was obsession. Seth vanished from public view. No interviews. No updates. Even WWE's official communications remained vague. One statement, buried in a press release, read, "Rollins will take time off to focus on his health and recovery." But insiders knew better. Behind closed doors, Rollins was already planning. Not just a return, but a reckoning. One WWE trainer, speaking on condition of anonymity, recalled a moment during Rollins' rehab that still chills him to this day. He wasn't focused on walking again. He wasn't focused on his flexibility or range of motion. He kept asking questions like, "Who's been making moves while I've been gone, and where is Heyman?" It wasn't physical therapy. It was strategy. Like a general planning a counterattack while his leg was still in a brace. Then came the silence. Weeks passed. Then months. No tweets. No leaks. Not even Becky Lynch, his wife and fellow superstar, shared any updates. Fans speculated everything, from retirement to a career-threatening re-injury. But backstage, rumors grew louder. Something was happening. And it involved more than just Rollins. Sami Zayn, who had been Rollins' uneasy ally in the months leading up to the injury, was seen in cryptic backstage segments, receiving unknown texts. Ricochet's sudden and unexplained push was abruptly halted. Chad Gable began behaving erratically in promo segments, as if playing a character that had yet to be introduced. It didn't make sense, until tonight, because when the lights dimmed and Seth Rollins appeared at the top of the Raw stage, dressed in a simple black tactical jacket, no music, no pyro, no theatrics, what followed wasn't just a comeback. It was a declaration. Behind him emerged two silhouettes. Then a third. And finally, a fourth. The camera shook as it struggled to catch all the faces. First, Ricochet, his high-flying chaos now subdued into something sharper. Controlled. Next, Chad Gable, no longer smiling, his Olympian discipline refocused into a militaristic gaze. Then came Bronson Reed, a walking fortress with eyes that burned with vengeance. And finally, shockingly, standing just behind Rollins, the man who once tried to destroy him, Johnny Gargano. Each of them wore identical black jackets. No logos. No brands. Just unity. And as they flanked Rollins on the ramp, the crowd didn't know whether to cheer, boo, or hold their breath. Because this wasn't a faction. This was a response. Backstage, chaos erupted. Sources tell us Paul Heyman, who had been backstage with Solo Sikoa and the remnants of the Bloodline, immediately left the arena floor. Cameras captured him making a phone call, allegedly to Roman Reigns. Because if Rollins was back, and he was building an army, the implications were seismic. Reigns, who hasn't been seen in weeks, was reportedly watching Raw from a private location in California. Those close to the tribal chief describe his reaction as tense and uncharacteristically silent. And according to one Bloodline associate, Roman didn't see this coming. None of us did. We thought Seth was still rehabbing. We were wrong. The question that now haunts WWE, why these men? Why now? The answer lies in betrayal. Ricochet was once promised opportunity, he never got it. Chad Gable was laughed out of main events. Bronson Reed was used as a pawn. And Johnny Gargano? He was Rollins' enemy once. But tonight, they were all united under one truth: the system failed them. And Rollins? He's always known how to burn systems to the ground. As Rollins stood at the center of the ring, surrounded by his new war council, he didn't speak for nearly a full minute. He just stared into the hard camera. Unblinking. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "You thought you broke me. You thought I'd stay down. But I learned something while I was gone. I don't need your cheers. I don't need your respect. I need vengeance. And I'm not alone." With those words, the lights cut out. When they returned, Rollins and his new faction were gone. What just happened wasn't just the return of Seth Rollins. It was the unveiling of a revolution. A new war. A new front in WWE's blood-stained battlefield. And in the silence that followed, one truth remained: Roman Reigns just lost control of the story. Because the visionary isn't just back. He's building a kingdom of his own. It wasn't long after the lights cut to black and Seth Rollins vanished from the ring that the backstage world of WWE erupted into barely contained chaos. Not the kind you see on screen, no steel chairs, no promos, no cinematic slow pans, but the kind that creeps behind the curtains. Frantic calls. Slammed doors. Whispered orders over headsets. In the production truck, the feed director turned and asked the question that nobody could answer: was that sanctioned? Because in the span of 10 minutes, Seth Rollins had re-entered the landscape, not as a returning hero, not as a broken man searching for redemption, but as a general with a cause. And the faction he'd unveiled wasn't just a team. It was a manifesto. And somewhere, hundreds of miles away, Roman Reigns had just realized the walls were closing in. The reaction from the Bloodline camp was immediate and terrified. Paul Heyman, the man known for controlling narratives, suddenly found himself playing defense. According to sources within WWE, Heyman immediately left the gorilla position the moment Rollins disappeared, his face pale, lips tightly pursed. An assistant producer saw him fumble with his phone backstage, repeatedly calling a private line, Reigns' line, but the signal was weak. "We're exposed," he reportedly whispered into the phone. "He's back. And he's got them." What followed inside WWE's backstage environment was unlike anything the company had experienced since the implosion of the Shield. Several high-ranking producers were seen pulling aside talent who had previously aligned with Rollins. A quiet internal probe began. Who knew this was coming? Who helped Rollins prepare this return? And then, in the middle of this storm, another figure entered the scene, Triple H. He hadn't been scheduled to appear on Raw. His office lights had been dark since early evening. But the moment Rollins stepped onto the ramp, several on-site staff noticed a black SUV pull into the loading bay. Moments later, Hunter was seen walking briskly through the corridor, no smile, no headset, just pure intensity in his stride. He headed straight to the control room, bypassing agents and talent alike. According to a technician who witnessed the moment, he didn't say anything when he walked in. He just stared at the monitor and clenched his jaw. Like something had been set in motion, and there was no way to stop it. Sources close to Triple H say he was aware Rollins was rehabbing faster than expected. But what he wasn't prepared for was the formation, a strategic alignment of discarded warriors. Rollins, Ricochet, Gable, Reed, Gargano. Men WWE had undervalued. Overlooked. Humiliated. Back in California, Roman Reigns reportedly watched the broadcast in near-total silence. A close confidant of the Inoue family revealed that Reigns paused the footage twice. Once at the moment Rollins first appeared. And again when Gargano stepped through the curtain. He thought Rollins would come back looking for sympathy, the source said. But what he saw was war. Roman isn't afraid, but he's angry. That changes everything. And it does, because for the last 2 years, Roman Reigns has operated as the gravitational center of WWE. The bloodline storyline, the championships, the betrayals. They all orbited him. His silence carried more power than most men's promos. His gaze alone could shift locker room alliances. But now, that silence feels different. He's no longer the unchallenged alpha. He's being hunted, and Rollins? He's not just chasing a match. He's coming for the entire infrastructure. According to leaks from WWE creative meetings, Rollins' return was kept tightly under wraps. Very few knew. Even fewer understood the extent of what was about to unfold. "We didn't even know Gargano was back," said one senior writer. "We'd assumed his contract was frozen during his paternity leave. Then boom, he's standing in the ring like he's part of a revolution. That's not a pop. That's a power move. And make no mistake, this is about power." Rollins didn't return to reclaim a title. He returned to reclaim the narrative. The one Roman hijacked. The one Heyman orchestrated. The one that turned the bloodline into a dynasty and left everyone else forgotten in its shadow. What Seth Rollins has just done is declare that the era of the bloodline's uncontested dominance is over, but what's most chilling is the precision of this coup. Each man in Rollins' faction brings a specific weapon to the table: Ricochet, the speed demon who never had direction. Gable, the technician with a chip on his shoulder. Reed, the unstoppable wall of destruction. Gargano, the master of mind games and underdog psychology. This isn't a gang, it's a chessboard. And Rollins is playing the long game. Meanwhile, the effect on the locker room has been immediate. Whispers have begun. Alliances are fraying. Superstars are watching their backs. A rising NXT star who requested anonymity said it bluntly: when Rollins walked out, the energy backstage changed. Everyone's asking, which side are you on? And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying implication. This isn't just a return storyline. It's a reckoning. A rebalancing of WWE's ecosystem. Roman Reigns may still hold the titles, but Seth Rollins now holds the momentum. One top commentator said it best: this wasn't the beginning of a feud. It was the beginning of a civil war. And now the most powerful question looming across WWE is no longer, is Seth Rollins healthy enough to return? It's what happens when Roman Reigns finally steps back into the ring and realizes the kingdom he built is under siege. Because whether Roman speaks tomorrow or stays silent for another week, the message is already ringing loud across every WWE locker room, boardroom, and fanbase: the visionary didn't just return. He reprogrammed the battlefield, and from here on out, there's no turning back. The whispers began before midnight, long after the cameras stopped rolling. Long after the arena lights dimmed and the fans had filed out into the cold Brooklyn night. Long after Seth Rollins and his new faction disappeared like ghosts into the backstage maze. In the corridors of power, where the real games are played, someone was already trying to kill the rebellion before it could grow, and his name was Paul Heyman. If Roman Reigns is the tribal chief, the monarch of WWE, then Paul Heyman is his hand, his architect, his spymaster. And tonight, as the world digested the chaos that had unfolded on Monday Night Raw, Heyman was already several moves ahead. He always is. He has to be. Because while Rollins makes revolutions look theatrical, Heyman makes them impossible. Inside a black SUV parked just outside the arena, Heyman sat flanked by two security advisors. Not WWE staffers. These were his people. Hired. Discreet. Clean. And the conversation he was having wasn't about WrestleMania. It wasn't about storyline continuity. It was about containment. He's not just back, Heyman reportedly said. He's organized. Calculated. That was military precision. Not a pop. Not a comeback. That was a declaration of war. And if we let it breathe, it grows. Sources close to Heyman say he immediately began reaching out to key allies, talents, producers, executives. He wanted names. He wanted loyalty. He wanted weaknesses. He wasn't going to wait for Roman to return. Roman was still hours away, brooding in silence across the country. And Heyman knew, if this threat wasn't contained fast, it wouldn't just shake the locker room, it could dethrone the king. By Tuesday morning, texts were already being exchanged between Heyman and Solo Sikoa. They read like battlefield instructions: secure SmackDown. Monitor NXT call-ups, no surprises. Find out who's with Rollins and who's pretending not to be. One source within WWE Creative claims Heyman has quietly begun compiling a loyalty map. A living document categorizing talent by allegiance, bloodline friendly, Rollins sympathetic, or uncommitted. And those on the fence? Heyman's targeting them next. With promises. Or consequences. Back in Stamford, WWE's headquarters stirred with a different kind of tension. Executives who once saw Rollins as the perfect modern superstar, charismatic, versatile, crowd-approved, were now whispering that he'd gone rogue. That his sudden return and faction reveal had caught even them by surprise. He bypassed the machine, one VP said. There were no teases, no vignettes, no return promo packages. He just appeared, with a militia. It was like a corporate coup. But the truth is more chilling, because this wasn't just Rollins executing a comeback, this was Rollins executing a plan. According to a leak from a trusted WWE producer, Rollins had been recruiting during his rehab. Not on screen. Not even in locker rooms. But privately. Quietly. He'd send encrypted messages to disillusioned talent. Check in with veterans who felt overlooked. Visit training facilities under the guise of supporting young wrestlers, but walk away with potential soldiers. He was building a faction the same way Heyman builds dynasties, the source said. One whisper at a time. Which is why Heyman is panicking now, because the man who once stood opposite him in the Shield, who held the line against Brock Lesnar, against authority, against the bloodline itself, is no longer interested in survival. He wants dominance. But if Rollins is playing chess, Heyman is countering with something far more unpredictable. He's looking to corrupt from within. Reports have already surfaced that Heyman made contact with one of Rollins' new recruits, an offer of protection, prestige, and a spot at Roman's table. No name has been confirmed. But rumors swirled that Ricochet, long underappreciated, always restless, was the first target, and then there's the wild card, Cody Rhodes, still in pursuit of finishing his story. Still popular. Still unaligned. According to a source inside Cody's camp, Heyman placed a call late Tuesday evening. Not to offer an alliance, but to offer information. "Your story doesn't end with Roman," Heyman allegedly said. "It ends with the man who's trying to burn the whole place down." Insiders speculate Heyman is attempting to position Cody as a third force, a disruptor who could fracture Rollins' rise from the opposite end. A wedge. A warning, but here's the part that has everyone inside WWE talking: Roman Reigns still hasn't spoken. No tweets. No statements. No video messages. The tribal chief remains in silence, but for how long, and what happens when he does finally respond? One Bloodline affiliate put it like this: when Roman gets quiet, he's planning. But this time, it's not just about defending his title. It's about defending his empire. And when he returns, he's not walking in as champion. He's walking in as the last king in a kingdom under siege. And that siege is spreading. Reports from SmackDown hint at subtle changes to backstage protocols. New security. Talent agents being rotated. Scripts being locked until the last minute. One veteran described it as paranoia in a crown. Meanwhile, Rollins' new faction is already moving. No official name has been declared. But the rumors call them the Reclamation. A faction not UST of strength, but of justice. Men wronged by the machine. Men who were promised the future and given scraps. And now, under Rollins, they're taking it, and in the shadows, Heyman sharpens his knives, because this is no longer a storyline, this is no longer about titles or main events, this is WWE's war of succession, and the only certainty is this: by the time Roman Reigns walks through the curtain again, someone will already be waiting for him. It happened without warning. No cryptic tweets. No teaser graphics. No thunderous announcement from WWE headquarters. Just a heartbeat, one long, suspended heartbeat that stretched across the Barclays Center like the hush before a hurricane. And then, in a moment that sent every fan into stunned silence, the Titantron lit up with a single symbol, the chiseled tribal R. For weeks, Roman Reigns had remained hidden. Silent. Absent. The whispers were growing louder. Some said he was injured, others claimed he was avoiding the confrontation he couldn't control. Some even believed he was done. But tonight, all of that ended. Roman Reigns had returned, and the world would never be the same again. The arena went black, the sound of wind. Then fire. Then something primal, a slow, ritualistic drumbeat. And then, the man himself. The screen split into 3 black and white flashes, Roman walking a dark corridor, his title dragging behind him like a chain. Roman staring out over a cliff into the sea. Roman alone in a church, kneeling at a stone altar, his hands trembling. There were no words. No narration. Just music. And silence. And a single message at the bottom of the screen: he never left. You just forgot who he was. And when the lights returned, there he stood, Roman Reigns, draped in black. Hair tied back. No gold around his waist. No Usos. No Paul Heyman. Just the tribal chief, alone in the center of the ring, as the audience around him fluctuated between awe and unease. This was not the Roman Reigns of recent years. He looked harder. Meaner. Sharper, and then he spoke only 5 words: I made you, Seth Rollins. There was no music. No pause for cheers. Just a stare into the camera that shattered through every screen watching at home. What followed wasn't a promo. It wasn't even a warning. It was a funeral speech. He spoke about building the modern WWE on his back. He spoke about carrying the industry during pandemics, injuries, and broken alliances. He spoke about giving men like Rollins a second life when they had nothing left, and then he paused, just long enough to let the weight of the moment choke the air from the room. You didn't return with a faction. You returned with my mistakes, he said. You returned with my unfinished business. Ricochet? Gable? Reed? I beat them all. And Gargano? I forgot he existed. But you. Seth Rollins. I never forgot about you. Because you were always the one looking for a back door to my throne. And that was when the arena shifted again, because from the upper rafters, a flicker of movement, the spotlight snapped on, and there, like phantoms summoned by name, stood Seth Rollins and his faction, staring down from the mezzanine level like predators stalking their prey. Rollins was no longer smiling. He stood with arms folded, face hardened into stone. Behind him, Ricochet leaned against the railing, arms crossed. Bronson Reed stared straight down with unmoving eyes. Gable was pacing. And Johnny Gargano? He was smirking. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They just stood there. Watching. Roman turned to face them. Still holding the mic. Still calm. This isn't a revolution, Roman said, eyes narrowing. This is desperation. You could feel the breath leave the arena. Not from shock. But from the weight. The psychological warfare. And then, the most unnerving moment of the night, Rollins pulled out a microphone, but didn't turn it on. Instead, he threw it over the balcony. A statement. No words, just presence, just defiance. And that's when Roman did something even more chilling. He smiled, not wide. Not theatrical. Just a flicker. The kind of smile that warned of something terrible, because Roman wasn't scared. He was waiting, and so, the arena remained frozen in a perfect standoff. Seth Rollins and his army watching from above. Roman Reigns standing alone in the ring. The past and future of WWE facing each other in absolute silence. No punch was thrown. No title was lifted. But in that moment, everyone knew, this wasn't a rivalry, this was a collision course, the visionary versus the tribal chief, faith versus fear, legacy versus power, and the only question now is who will strike first. The disappearance wasn't announced, there was no injury report. No best wishes from WWE. No tribute video or farewell tweet. 1 week he was there, standing strong behind Seth Rollins, ready for battle, and the next, he was gone. Bronson Reed vanished, and for those paying attention, it didn't feel like a storyline. It felt like a message. It started subtly. Monday Night Raw opened without him. Rollins appeared backstage with Ricochet, Gable, and Gargano, but Reed's name wasn't mentioned. Not by the commentary team. Not by his faction. Not even by the visionary himself. As if the mountain of muscle who had stood like a fortress beside them had never existed. But backstage, the whispers were spreading like fire. Sources inside WWE say Reed was pulled just hours before the show went live. A sudden call. No explanation. When asked, staffers were told to focus on the segments that matter. One producer reportedly said under his breath, Paul got to him. Because somewhere behind the lights and storylines, Paul Heyman was moving pieces on the board quietly, strategically, violently. According to insiders, Heyman had spent the past 7 days working the hallways of WWE like a diplomat turned hitman. Not with fists, but with leverage. Calling in favors. Offering protection. Promising power. And when he couldn't buy allegiance, he broke it. Bronson Reed was the first casualty. We don't know if he accepted an offer, or if something was planted to force his removal. But what we do know is that his name has been scrubbed from upcoming house shows. He's off the internal booking sheets. His locker, emptied. Quietly. Completely. One veteran backstage said it best, Bronson didn't walk. He was erased. And Rollins? He hasn't commented publicly. But those close to him say the fury is boiling beneath the surface. Because Bronson wasn't just muscle. He was a symbol. Proof that Rollins could build a faction outside the machine. Proof that forgotten warriors could rise again. Now, that symbol is gone, and just as the Rollins camp reels, another tremor hits. Solo Sikoa is wavering. Until now, Solo has been Roman's shadow. His enforcer. His hammer. But recent segments reveal a subtle change. He no longer walks 2 steps behind. He no longer lowers his eyes. He stands taller. Stares longer. And in a backstage segment, cut short before broadcast, he reportedly asked Heyman a question that left the locker room stunned. What if he's right? No one had to ask who he was. The visionary is becoming more than a rival. He's becoming a temptation, and that terrifies Heyman, because Solo is the key, the heir in waiting. The final wall between Roman and total exposure. If Solo shifts, the Empire fractures. Which is why Heyman has intensified his efforts. Reports indicate that security has been increased around Bloodline segments. Scripts are now hand-delivered, not emailed. New clauses have been added to certain